Perfect. Thank you so much for that. So just a brief about African Pharmaceutical Network. It's a non-profit initiative with an aim of bringing together players in the African pharmaceutical sector for knowledge sharing, policy shaping, and innovation nurturing discussions towards a robust pharmaceutical sector that is anchored on reliable access to safe, efficacious, and affordable quality medicines for African people. And the background of this is that we have limited local pharmaceutical manufacture in Africa, which is acknowledged globally. And we also know as African players that we have a shortfall in that area, and there's need to drive local pharma manufacturing, especially at this point when we're having a global pandemic. Then we have a segregated continental pharmaceutical industry, separation operations that are ranging from regulatory processes. We have different factions working on different lines. How about integrating these and working as a common unit? And that would be a very critical bit as we look at how we move forward. Then there's lack of a common platform to drive this agenda. So what we do as Africa Pharmaceutical Network is to provide that platform where we bring different players within the industry, we work together as a unit and see where we can take the Africa pharma industry forward. So that is the overall background. And our aim is to foster knowledge sharing, promoting best practices, championing for responsive market-driven policies and guidelines that are going to ensure we have a robust Africa pharma industry. Then at the end of the day, all these that we talk about in terms of strengthening the pharmaceutical systems, focusing on local manufacturing, will be dependent on investments. Can we stimulate investment in the Africa pharma industry, not only from the Western countries and the global space, but also from within the African space by the people who are already involved? And I know some of our guests for the session will share some insights and will be playing a critical role in telling us where do we head from the current situation where we are, with the impacts of COVID-19 having been felt all over the world, and especially in African context where we know we have the constraints. So that is an overview of what we're looking at Africa Pharma Network. And the first guest speaker for the session, who is our keynote speaker, is Professor Jimezi Anyakora, the Chief Executive Officer, Bloom Public Health from Nigeria. So welcome, Professor.
Thank you so much. So good. So thank you. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
I want to share from there.
I'll share the slides for you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, David, for inviting me. So I think it's a very timely topic. Really, it's quite timely. I want to start with this this slide. I love it a lot. Each time I talk, I bring it up as my first slide. For the past 2 decades, there's been a lot of things happening in Africa. Everybody trying to support Africa. So many programs. They have a pre-qualification program, PEPFAR program, United program, Global Fund program, PEPFAR program, and so on and so forth. Well, I think why I'm so excited about what African Pharmaceutical Network is doing is that we're coming together to do a rethink. Is this a way to go? You know, when when all these supports are coming, I mean, it comes from an emergency point of view. How do we support Africa? As we move along, can you share the next slide, please? As we move along, so that it's not really sustainable. I'm using this as an example, Global Fund as an example. I mean, there are many programs like this in Africa. I'm just looking at one example. Global Fund started in 2002. 2002. Combat malaria. Can somebody fix the background noise?
Sorry, you can unmute yourself, please.
Okay, sorry. So in 2002, Global Fund was started, and this has done tremendous good in Africa. A lot of, I mean, if you look at the history of what Global Fund has done, it's huge. Billions of dollars have been spent in the past 18 years. Of course, great progress has been made in combating these diseases, HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. A lot of progress has been made, a lot. And of course, Africa is among the biggest beneficiaries of this program. Africa has been benefiting a lot, which is very good for us. We are really a lot of, most countries practically rely on Global Fund for their pharmaceutical support. Now, but the sad news is African manufacturers are excluded from this program. When it's something that, having been a player in this for a while, I feel that this may be the one of the big projects African Pharmaceutical Network can push for. How do we change this narrative? How can we continue in this process that all these big things happening? What will happen to us afterwards? Next slide. So my question is this sustainable? Of course, I'm sure everybody will agree with me, it's not sustainable. To have Africa where we have the diseases, we have the population, and we are not really making any efforts to participate in the solution. And as we saw in the past 4 years or past sometime in the world, things are changing. Countries are thinking inwards. Are we going to continue with this kind of support for a long time? I'm not sure. And if Africa as a continent, we don't come together thinking, how do we solve this problem? How do we start looking for solutions? Next slide. So it's clear, funding will dry up one day, for sure. And if capacity and capabilities are not built, we're going to have a much bigger crisis than we are thinking, really, a much, much bigger crisis. What will happen is that once the funding stops, we are not capable of even supporting the basic things that we should be looking at. One thing COVID has done for us is has given us that this is not a sustainable plan. And I'm happy that this African Pharmaceutical Network is coming up with this kind of forum, so we can ask the real questions. Is this sustainable? How can we continue? And for me, the time to start is now. The private sector has to play a role. The government, of course, there are issues, because they too much reliance on the donor world. In fact, one of the, a few weeks ago, I was in the forum and I made a comment. COVID-19 is here. Most countries in Africa are just folding their arms, waiting for aid to come out to support their countries for vaccines. And yeah, nothing is happening. So the same way, the same thing is happening really in the pharmaceutical sector. We need to wake up. Next slide, please. For the first time, many manufacturers, I support many of them, are getting jittery about the raw materials they needed. Most of them couldn't even import raw materials because most countries started thinking differently. They forgot about economic arguments. They're thinking of national security, national interests. So they're trying to hoard the raw materials. And what this brought to fore was, how can we ignore the most important aspect of our life, healthcare? Imagine if India and China shuts their borders today. What kind of situation we don't have in Africa? So going back to the whole situation, we need to wake up. We saw the disruption in movement of goods. Global supply chain has changed entirely. And the biggest calamity will be for us not to learn from this. Many countries across the world are adjusting. In fact, a lot of investments across the world trying to rethink, how do we make sure that we don't have this kind of panic when this thing happens again? And also people are seeing medicine supply as a security issue, national security issue. And this is something I'm hoping and pushing that African Pharmaceutical Network bring it very much to the fore. Medicine supply is not just an economic thing, it's national security. If all the people living with HIV in Africa, if they cannot have access to their medicines, all people with different illnesses around the continent, if we don't have a plan to make sure that these people are secured. Next slide, please. So, food for thought. This is another slide that I always like to bring up whenever I'm talking, because it makes the points so clear. In the future, regional and global power, national stability will be determined not by who controls arms, but by who controls access to medicines. This was made several years ago, it was like a prophetic proclamation by the current Minister of Health in Mali. He used to be the executive director of UNAIDS those days. Really, we cannot say that everything is normal. we cannot allow our medicine supply to be delegated fully as a continent. What can we do? I mean, also to mean that initially when what is it started coming, they solved a lot of problems. But now it's a different ballgame. It's time to move from emergency to reality. How do we solve this? How do we move ahead? How do we become, as a continent, make sure that medicine access is a basic human right thing? We cannot continue in this way. Next slide. So I'm trying to make it high level because my colleagues will go into details in each of these things in the next presentations. So first of all, I want to look at African pharma industry at a glance. We have close to $40 billion as the size of the market. And the last study projected that by last year, it would have been $60 billion. I don't know what it is now because of this pandemic. We'll have to find out. Meaning that it's a big market. Yet, what is the contribution of the locals, the Africans in this? If you look at it, it's quite small. It's very, very insignificant. And it's not a good thing for us, considering this is health. And that's where it shows an opportunity for growth that we cannot continue to play, follow up in this game. Is the first thing that we should strive to, how do we make sure that we secure our people? How can we leverage so many things happening in the world to make sure that we secure our people? Another important statistics is of all the manufacturers in Africa, only 30% of medicines needed in Africa are done locally. That is so low compared with Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, they have 97% of medicines needs supplied locally. So this is a country that is considered stable because they can manage the shocks in supply chain. But in Africa, you just need to close the ports for 2 months or 1 month, you have the biggest crisis we can think of. And also for active pharmaceutical ingredients, practically no country manufactures it, apart from South Africa. Really, it's like practically we are not in the game. And this is a problem and also an opportunity, meaning that we have an opportunity to grow, to have such a huge gap in API supply is an invitation for many people in Africa to think. And also when you look at the kind of talents across the globe of African descent, you see that it's something that is doable and is possible. Of course, not everybody can do it. Africa as a continent, we have different possibilities for different countries, but at least within the continent, as a group, as a continent, we can start thinking, how can we make sure that we have access to APIs? Of course, you know, with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, it makes it a much better an incentive for business. Knowing that you have 1 billion people as your market size, so you can make an investment. Next one I want to look at is the regulatory capacity. When David was introducing this webinar, he mentioned something of that nature, and I think it's a very important thing. We have a fragmented regulatory system. I cannot, what if I'm registered in Nigeria and Ghana does not recognize it, or Kenya does not recognize it? This is really not good for the continent. We need to start thinking, how do we harmonize regulatory systems and make sure that we're able to play? Because having a bigger market is an incentive for people to invest. Somebody who is in Benin Republic with a very small population, yeah, well, if you know that I have a market that is bigger than Benin Republic, I can invest. Another point I want to look at is limited specialized pharmaceutical skills. In the past 10 years, I've been trying to support the industry for a while, and then this is one of the biggest things we see. The skills are not there. Can they be there? Yes. There should be a deliberate effort to build skills. Good enough, we have a pool of talents of African descent all over the world. So which means we have capacity or possibility of pulling them as fast as we can pull them. And this is another thing I'm hoping that the African Pharmaceutical Network will push for. We need to have a deliberate effort. It cannot be just happen by chance. No, it should be a deliberate effort, different skill set that we need to make sure that we have a secure pharmaceutical sector in Africa. It cannot happen overnight. There should be a plan. We need some numbers and a plan to get it done. Of course, another thing that one of the biggest pain of a manufacturer in Africa is lack of access to all the things you need. I call it pharmaceutical ecosystem. Really, if I'm in India, I need to check off my HVAC, and I just make a call. Maybe next day I'll have that done. Most African countries want to do that. It can take you like 3 months or 4 months to get done. Let me tell you a small story before I continue. In Nigeria, I was supporting a company. Once I went to see what they were doing, I saw that they had a problem with the HVAC. I told them, sorry, this was wrong. You have to work on it. That took them over 9 months to do. I mean, it was so painful for me, too much pain for me, because they had to get in touch with somebody in India. They had to come and look at it. It was like back and forth. So for us to make progress, there's no way we can continue this way. We have to pull what are the ecosystem to make manufacturing possible. Can we have those services needed to make sure that people are supported? For a manufacturing company, there are many services around that will make him able to produce quality medicines. Next slide, please. So I think I'm almost getting to the end of my topic. So what I would recommend for me, we need to have a plan. Once again, too, I'm seeing an African Pharmaceutical Network as a platform that can advance this. We need to have a strategic plan and funding to advance pharmaceutical access in Africa. There's no way we can compete with established big pharmas. At the same time, there's no way we can sustain this kind of arrangements where Africa is like a dumping ground where others come and dump. What if they stop one day? How can we continue? So we have to start thinking now that we have access to medicine through different mechanisms. How can we look forward to the next 5, 10 years? What are the plans we can put in place so that as it may happen, if something happens, we're able to stick and get going. Second one is we need to have a plan to spur local manufacturing. It is very easy to import medicines in Africa, very easy. Manufacture is a lot of headache. As a continent is the only pathway to ensure health in Africa. So what can we do? This is something also a kind of a plan that APN can pick up again. We need to make a plan. How do we spur? How can we mobilize incentives? What can make them? What will motivate somebody to invest money building a facility instead of going to India or China to import them and have them in a month or two? This is something that requires a lot of thinking. As David said in the opening statement, pulling together as a continent, how do we make this happen? How do we see countries that have advantages of manufacturing? So different countries playing a role to make sure that as a continent, there's a strong support to make sure manufacturing happens. The next one, which I consider very critical, not because I'm an academic, but because this is the reality I've seen in the field. No, I've been in the field, I've been in the classroom. So there is a big workforce deficiency. If we want to make a plan, this is where we start. How do we start building pharmaceutical scientists that can support the industry so that we can make medicines locally? This is something I also see an opportunity, a great one, for African Pharmaceutical Network. We build a network. How do we pull crowds? How do we mobilize talents? How do we encourage them? How do we train them? How do we retrain over and over again to see that progress? My next recommendation is on technology transfer. Yes, we cannot, we have to leapfrog. We don't want to learn from beyond the queue. No, we have to, anything coming out now should be at the top of a notch, top notch. Really, how do we leverage tech transfer? many countries, many companies are willing and ready. This is something we can take advantage of. Of course, there should be a platform where, in fact, I don't know whether African Pharmaceutical Network can do that. A platform, an independent platform that becomes a unbiased platform that connects the tech transfer people, those that bring the tech and those that receive it. So this is something that is not existing now. We need a body that will have play that role. So that way, it's a fair game for everybody. So somebody bringing the tech from Western world, an African company that needs it, they play a role. Somebody that is a kind of unbiased umpire in the whole field. We need it. We cannot continue to keep improving. One of the biggest pain I get here is that most times you see many companies, they invest so much money because of knowledge gap. They make so much mistake and then they can't even, there's no reason for them to get to that point. But if we connect as a connecting point where somebody can go, I need to do this, who can help me? Whoever that the platform is, connects and then things will work out well. And lastly, my recommendation, there's a lot of commitment by donor world to support Africa. This is huge. This is something very, very exciting. Global Fund this year will spend billions of US dollars supporting African countries in different malaria, different medicines. USAID will do the same. PEPFAR will do the same. DFID will do the same. All these are great. How can we start leveraging these to support African manufacturing? If somebody knows that, okay, we're going to spend $100 million in Kenya for anti-malaria in the next 3 years, it's an incentive to invest. This is something that nobody is doing. We need to see how we push this. How can we get the donor world on the same table with the African manufacturers to have some guarantees that even though, of course, the issue we have usually is a quality issue. So give the person guarantee, I need these medicines in these countries, but this is my quality level. It's an incentive for someone to invest in that quality and make sure we get to that point. So, I mean, really, I'm going to end here, but basically my summary of my point is, as a continent, we cannot continue this way. We need to have somebody, a platform. So African Pharmaceutical Network, I think you are coming at the right time. Everybody's waking up to the reality that COVID has shown us that we are living in a dream world. The real reality is that we have to make sure that our population will continue to have access to the medicines they need in order to live a very good life. And to do that, we need to have some local medicine manufacturing. Not everything. No. I mean, of course, there's some specialized medicines I cannot do in Africa, but the basic ones. That way, as we achieve our public health goals, also achieve economic prosperity. Once again, thank you, David, and the whole African Pharmaceutical Network team for inviting me to this webinar. I will be willing to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jimezi. That was a very, very wonderful presentation covering all the different components that are very critical when we talk about the pharmaceutical systems generally. And one of the critical bits that we have to acknowledge is from the initial having a common plan on how we're moving next, we have local pharmaceutical manufacturing. And one critical bit that we also have to acknowledge is the pharmaceutical workforce. We can't achieve all that we're talking about unless we have the right skill set, the right people with the right skill sets to make that happen. And I believe from these discussions, we are going to point into some of these things. And one bit that I wanted to just ask a single question before we move to the next person. We're talking about developing pharmaceutical development by economy, having a roadmap and local pharmaceutical manufacturing as a common agenda that can help us leverage advancement, can help us drive the development of the pharmaceutical industry as one thing, and at the same time looking at how that can address other economic ecosystem issues. Like let's say, for example, economic challenges as a security, health as a security issue. We know there's the pharmaceutical manufacturing plan for Africa, but the AU NEPAD. So far, it's now 5 years down the line, and there hasn't been much traction that is being gained. What would be the impediments at that point? Because I know you're working within the pharmaceutical system strengthening area, and maybe you could have an insight that some of the participants here can take and see how to implement and work on.
Good, thank you so much. I think the biggest issue we have in Africa is that there's a big disconnect between the government and the private sector. Pharmaceutical plan for Africa is actually supposed to be government-driven, but most governments don't even know what is there. You go to many countries now, there are people that signed that and didn't even read it. Those that read it are no more in government. So it's particularly as you need a driver that is not just government. In Nigeria, for example, we've put together a few people to change the narrative. We're trying to set up to implement it in Nigeria through a mechanism we call Pharmacity. If a National Pharmacists Association of Nigeria, in partnership with Bloom, a company I run, we're trying to set up a pharmaceutical city. That is a way we're trying to drive government, to put government into the discussion so that I can implement that PMPA. And I think we need advocates. So I don't know why I put so much hope on APN. We really have a lot of work to do. We know that to advance this discussion, we need people that will keep on the doors. Of course, those who are in the private sector, a company, manufacturers, they don't have that kind of energy. They are more short-term in their profit today and tomorrow. So there's really kind of an unbiased person who sees the bigger picture that for a continent of this size, to make progress, we need to implement that wonderful document. And to do that, what will these countries do? Of course, some countries are doing something. Ethiopia is doing a lot. Ethiopia has a plan. Ethiopia has a wonderful plan. Rwanda is doing something. Different countries are doing their own bit by bit, but there should be much more intensive push and advocacy to make sure it happens. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Advocacy, and that is the way that we engage the private sector and the government to ensure we drive a common agenda. And for the participants in the room, that is an action for all of us because we operate in the different countries. We know the needs and the gaps that we have. Let's take it up upon ourselves and drive a common agenda for advancement of the African pharmaceutical industry. Thank you so much, Professor Jimezi. And we'll move to the next person. I believe you'll be around. We'll have a couple of questions coming in. And for those who have questions, please send them through the chat box as we continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So in the next presentation, we are having Bina Maida, the company Pharmacist Cosmos Pharmaceuticals Limited in Kenya. So Bina, welcome.
Thank you, David. I know my previous person has spoken most of what I was going to say because everything surrounds what the local industry is all about, what challenges we are facing, and that is what my presentation basically will talk about. Next slide, David. Okay, so first let me start with what is the role of the local industry, and specifically during this pandemic. The most important role we had as a local pharmaceutical industry, and not only in Kenya, I believe all the local industries in their respective countries, we all were supposed to just make sure that we have medicines available for patients. Because during the pandemic, there was a lot of changes which were happening throughout the world. We had lockdowns happening, we had companies which were shutting down, we had companies which were reducing the sale of medicines, importation. So therefore it fell on us as a local industry to try and make sure that even though imports are not available, we're able to make medicines so that people of the country, our patients, do not suffer. And we know that there's so many chronic illnesses where patients have to take medicines on a daily basis. We would not want these patients to miss their dose. So that became our primary role, making sure that the medicines are available and they're still affordable and we're able to give it on time. So the topics I will concentrate on first, what was the impact of the COVID-19 on us as a local industry? Based on this, on the challenges that we faced, what opportunities arose out of it, and what is the way forward so that we don't have to wait for another pandemic to happen, but at least we are prepared and we know where we have gone wrong, what do we need to put in place, and what is available as our resources to make sure that this doesn't happen again to us. David, next slide. Okay, so when we look at the supply chain, which was the most affected, we had unavailability of raw materials, as has been mentioned with the previous speaker. It was something which was sudden, we had not expected. So when countries started shutting down the borders, they had started locking all importation. We suffered a lot in terms of raw materials, as well as some of the packaging materials. And as we all know, one of the biggest suppliers of raw materials throughout the world is India and China. So when these countries closed down, we had to take drastic measures to make sure that we are not suffering and we don't go at a loss. Because when we don't have raw materials, that would mean there would be no production, and that would mean there would be no medicines available. So we all started to look towards what are the alternate available vendors. And according to our good manufacturing practices, we had a vendor qualification process where we have to look for vendors who are able to give us the same quality of raw materials. And as we know, it is difficult at this time. It is time consuming because everyone is in a panic mode. It was difficult to try and look for vendors. When you get hold of vendors, you find some of them are working from home, therefore documentation, communication, everything was going so slow compared to what it was before. And these are some of the challenges that we did face during this period. And sometimes when you get a vendor, you get that they're charging very high prices. If no high prices, you will have delays when or because of shipping challenges, and then you have to bring the materials in through air. So you find all this unavailability, delay, not getting the correct vendors. These are some of the challenges that we faced during the pandemic. But what we learned from this was that we are actually relying so much on external supplies to the point that when something goes wrong in these countries, we are totally lost. And that is why I think everyone is currently stressing on the fact that we need to start looking into this so that we're not completely reliant on foreign supplies. We need to have something of our own. In the event that something goes wrong, there is a lockdown like this in other countries, we are not completely cut off from these supplies. Next was demand for medicines. And we also realized that when the countries started shutting down, most of the countries started reducing imports. They were only allowing what is manufacturing to happen enough for their own patients in their own countries. And that is why in Africa, a lot of countries suffered from reduced importation. And as previously stated, about 70 to 80% of medicines in Africa are imported. So we can only count 20 to 30% of the medicines are given locally. Now you can imagine when other countries lock down, how much is left? There's nothing coming in or very reduced medicines coming in. And that is where now we realized that if we had local manufacturing who could be able to supply these drugs, the situation would not have been that bad, yeah? Second was, there was also a lot of panic buying. Even though the drugs were available, there was a lot of panic buying, and this resulted in an even severe drug shortage because people went and stocked up medicines because they did not know, will these medicines be available in the market for long? If I don't buy it now and I need it for next month, will it still be available? Will the prices be the same? So all this led to drug shortages. And that is why it came upon the local manufacturers to try and see how much they're able to meet this demand. And in this period, we also saw a shift where we saw that patients were now being given locally available medicines, because if branded medicines or imported medicines are not available, you have to opt to whatever is available. And that is where now physicians, doctors started prescribing a lot of the locally manufactured medicines. So what I would say on this is that there is a demand for medicines, of course, but this demand has to be met now by the local manufacturers. And we have to work towards making sure that we're doing something to make sure that the demand that there is in the market for drugs, we're able to meet that demand. Okay, in terms of operations, we faced a lot, the same as other companies also. There was a lot of disruption in terms of work because, again, there was panic. We did not know exactly what we have to do, and there were a lot of guidelines coming in. There were a lot of interventions from the Ministry of Health for each country, and it was just our duty to try and make sure that work has to go on, but at the same time, we have to make sure that the employees are safe. And it's actually safe for them to work. So we had to do a lot. We had risk assessments done. We had to read the guidelines. We had to make sure that, yes, whatever the Ministry of Health, the WHO, whatever they're recommending, we've put in place so that the employees are also feeling safe, that they can come to work and we're not disrupting the shifts. And also what happened as an advantage, I would say, is that there was a lot of systems which now became online because documentation was a risk. Paper is a risk when you're moving things from one department to another. So we actually took advantage of the technology available. And I can say that currently we are not having a lot of physical meetings. Everything has gone online. So even though you're sitting at your home, you're sitting in your office, you can just attend meetings and work goes on. So I would say that was an advantage because initially we were not using this technology. And because of the pandemic, we've actually learned to live with what is there and use these technologies. Next slide, David. So now based on this pandemic, we saw some opportunities where we saw that the demand for locally manufactured medicines increased. Patients started taking them. They started trusting the quality. They started trusting medicines which are available locally, which was a good sign for us. Pharmacovigilance, which is currently being practiced in a lot of the countries in Africa, was appreciated. Because you see right now we're having a lot of vaccines being given and the patients are being told to monitor themselves. We have portals which have been put up by the regulatory authorities, and we're asked and requested to make sure that if we have any adverse events, if we're having any adverse reactions to these medicines, please try and report. All this helps us to just create a database of the medicines, which I think is a very good sign because it also shows that people are vigilant. There was also demand for new products where we had hand sanitizers, face masks, the protective equipments and all that. Initially, when the pandemic, when we had the outbreak, we had sanitizers coming from outside, we had face masks being imported, they were not locally manufactured a lot, and at that time the prices were very high. And that is why we would find not many people were able to access these items, which even increased the risk because people ended up using the same face masks or they were going for the cheaper quality face masks. But once these items started being manufactured locally, industries opted to manufacture them locally, the prices went drastically down. And for instance, if you buy a face mask, we used to buy a pack of face masks going for 4,000 shillings for 50 pieces. Currently, I'm buying the same for 400 shillings because they're now available locally. So right now I can comfortably wear a mask because I know it's available and the prices are very reasonable. So this is what it means when you have products manufactured locally. You can easily get them, the prices will be good, and you don't have to be scared whether they'll be available or not, okay? There's also business expansion opportunities because as the demand increases, as more molecules, as more medicines are required, there is need for business expansion. So I think it's something that the local industry can look into once they get the right support. Of course, when you have business expansions, you'll have job opportunities increasing, and this is job opportunities all over because we'll also have support industries. Because as the pharma industry grows, we also have our support industries which will grow together with us. So we are actually increasing job opportunities, not only in the pharma industry, but also in the support manufacturing industries, in the service industries. We don't have to call personnel from outside the country, outside the continent for your calibration services. You'll be getting reagents locally, you'll be getting your packaging materials locally, and they will also know that business is there. So they'll also increase and the quality will also be good. And there's also an opportunity after looking at this that maybe it's time that Africa as a whole started looking into having API manufacturers so that we're supporting the continent and not relying on outside countries. David, next slide. So the way forward would be, as a continent, we should try and look into how we are able to reduce the imports from 80% to a lower percentage. Of course, it's not something which can happen drastically, but it's something that can be looked into, have a strategic plan of how this can work. Because I would also like to point out that we have countries like India and Bangladesh and all other countries where at some point they were all importing, heavily importing from other countries. And they just decided that why are we importing medicines when we can locally make them? And right now, those are countries which are importing the maximum to the other countries. So why not Africa, right? We can also look into investing in terms of local vaccine manufacturing. I know there have been some discussions of having local manufacturers doing vaccines. It has not gotten far, and I think it's also something we can look into, where we can also have multinationals doing contract manufacturing and having vaccines readily available in the continent, so we don't have to rely on having these vaccines coming from outside countries. Because currently we are receiving donations, we're receiving vaccines from other countries, but at the same time, again, just like APIs, we're at the mercy of these countries. I think it's time we started looking into having these medicines locally made. We can also look into manufacturing new molecules, which currently are being imported. And you can find that then molecules, medicines, which are not being manufactured by a lot of countries in Africa. Why not look into manufacturing of these medicines so that we're able to reduce at least the importations of medicines, like being the first generic company in Africa, have more generic companies manufacturing molecules. So that we're, as much as we can, the dosage forms like tablets, syrups, suspensions, it's something that we have capacity, we have the skills, we have the equipment. We need to look into these things and not having to import everything. Only something that is not in our reach, something that it's a bit difficult, then we can look into having them as imported. And then we also need some government and regulatory support in terms of local manufacturing. Then only local manufacturing will be able to manufacture new molecules. They'll be able to even look into vaccine manufacturing. But of course, it has to be a joint venture between the manufacturers, the regulators, as well as the government. We can also try and look into the skills gap that we have currently. And you find there are many people who are getting expatriates from outside countries. Why not look into having our own local people empowered, trained, skilled, so that we're just relying on our own people. At the same time, we're creating job opportunities for these people. Next slide, David. We can also have more regional collaborations where just in Africa as a continent, have all countries collaborating. How can we increase the market? How can we improve the policies? Everything that we can do in terms of a region so that we're able to grow as a continent, we are growing in our own regions. We can also look into local contract manufacturing. Not only just having the MNCs distribute medicines here, we're importing medicines. We can also have contract manufacturing facilities, have a diversity of dosage forms, because this is what contract manufacturing will bring. You'll be having different dosage forms, different types of medicines. So we have a whole range of medicines which should be made locally available so that we're able to drastically reduce the percentage of drugs that we're importing from other countries. Because one advantage of having a local company is that you can actually go visit these companies. These are people you know, these are your all family members who are working in that company, people you know, people you trust making these medicines. Your own regulators, regulatory authorities are regulating them. Instead of having to depend on a company, having to depend on people outside we don't even know. So I would prefer having it locally made, because I know where it's made. I know where the company is, I know the quality, and I can trust what is being made there. We can also look at empowering the local manufacturing industries, that is a personnel, in terms of training personnel, increasing capacity, that is the capacity building, just making sure that the people available locally are empowered, they're skilled, so that we have the best of people working in these industries. And of course, that is when you'll have more research-oriented factories. We can also try and raise the GMP standards of local manufacturing industries. So we're actually at par with the standards of industries in the Western countries. Why not? It's something, guidelines are available, people are available. It's just a matter of having the drive. It's a matter of support. And I think this is also possible. We also need to encourage the investment in having more local manufacturing industries, because I know there are countries which are in Africa as a whole, the countries which heavily rely on imports, they have very less manufacturing industries, and all they need is just putting up the manufacturing industries, and I think they'll be able to supply part of what is imported. Currently, I would not say that there is nothing that the continent is not doing. Regions are doing, like in ESC, we also have a regional manufacturing plan, which is supposed to run from 2017 to 2027. So some of these projects are in progress. It's just that we need people to drive them so that we have the support we need. We have people who drive these projects and make sure that they're executed in a timely manner. We don't want projects which lag for a very long period of time until they're forgotten. So it's better we have a window period, and I know that our local manufacturers are willing to get one. If they get the support, then I don't think there's anything which is difficult. So with that, I would like to say that there is a lot which has been taught to us by this pandemic. We have learned we know the importance of having a local manufacturing industry, a local pharmaceutical industry, and we want to be available so that we're able to supply all the essential medicines required by patients. That's
Thank you so much, Bina.
So in case of any questions and answers, I think I can either answer them later or I can also answer the chat.
Thank you. So for whoever has questions, share them on the chat box. And the last, I just want to ask you one question as you log off from this presentation before we move to the next person. One of the critical challenges that we've been facing with local pharma manufacturing in the African context generally, people would prefer imported medication because they feel like the quality standards are not as optimal. And that is an issue. And even in your presentation, you've talked about how do we ensure that our local pharmaceutical manufacturers are compliant with GMP requirements and GMP provisions to ensure that the drugs that are being produced are meeting the market standards, the global standards, and are ideal and safe to the patients that are going to use them. Because if, as you mentioned, if I don't trust a particular product, I'd rather go for an alternative one or entirely fail to take that medication. So what are the measures that are being done, one, to ensure that the GMP measures are adopted by pharma manufacturers locally? That is one bit. And the other bit is how do we build trust in the use of our products? Because even if you make sure the quality standards are optimum, but the local people are not willing to take those products, there's no business sense in doing it. So how do we make a mix of the two? Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, so first I would like to say that our regulatory authorities, I know every country have their own regulatory authorities regulating the GMP standards of the industries. Currently, like in Kenya, we have the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, who do our GMP inspections. So it is their duty to make sure that we're actually compliant with our WHO GMP standards. And that is why they usually do an audit every 2 years. And it's only based on the audit that they're able to give us a license. And it's the same for every other country. When you're even exporting to other African countries, you really have to comply to those audit observations. And you're only given a license once they're satisfied that yes, the observations made are in compliance, the corrective preventive actions are in compliance. And also, the second thing is that, of course, we cannot talk to each and every patient taking the medicine. It is difficult. Therefore, it's a matter of creating awareness. It's a matter of having patients taking the medicines. It's a matter of doctors and physicians who are able to monitor the patients when they're put on their medicines. And then we get feedback, like, okay, patients are taking more of the locally available medicines and so far they're responding to them well. We have not received a lot of adverse reactions. That I would trust the quality, right? So it's just a matter of awareness. It's a matter of regulatory authority support, the government support to make sure that yes, there are companies which are available and they're compliant with the GMP standards. And I would trust the audit inspections from these regulatory authorities to know that yes, the companies which have been inspected are actually compliant with GMP standards.
Thank you so much for that. A very wonderful response to that in terms of how we ensure the regulators ensure we comply. And other than that compliance, we create awareness to ensure people are willing to take up those products. And as individuals, we are consumers of these healthcare products. So we need to give that feedback. Unless we report this kind of feedback and have that communication stream going, then we won't be able to make any advancements. If there are shortfalls in the pharmaceutical manufacturing and there's no feedback, then it means there's no room for improvement. But if we give that feedback, we're driving that agenda. Thank you so much, Bina, for that presentation. It's very insightful. And I believe as players in the pharma industry, we are going to make advancements and move from here knowing that we have a responsibility to advance our own common pharma industry agenda. Thank you for that. And whoever has any questions, please continue the conversation in the chat box, and even post this, we'll have the conversation going on. So the next speaker we're going to invite is Greg Perry, who is the Assistant Director General for the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, IFPMA. So Greg Perry, welcome.
Yes, good afternoon. And look, thank you very much for being invited to this event. And I do think the African Pharmaceutical Network is an excellent initiative, and it's vitally important that there is substantial cooperation and exchange on the continent with private sector operators within the pharmaceutical area in order to increase that voice. And it was mentioned before that one of the biggest challenges on the continent is the issue between the private sector and the government. And I think anything that can be done, not only to improve relationship between the private sector, but also to have a strong advocacy group with governments who at the end of the day actually will be creating a lot of the framework where the private sector works is fundamentally important. So I do congratulate you, David, and your colleagues for setting that up. Now, I'm not sure if you can actually see me, because on my screen I can't see myself. So I'm hoping you can see me.
Yes, we can see you.
We can. Great. Okay. Let me kick off then on. Let me just explain IFPMA itself for those who are listening in. So we represent over 30 R&D companies globally. We also have national associations over all 5 continents. There's about 50 national associations. Within the IFPMA, we have a specific Africa engagement strategy, which I'm very happy to oversee and be proud of doing that. Within that, we have 3 national associations based, one in South Africa, one in Kenya, and one in Ghana. Obviously, they operate nationally, but also have the companies operate on a regional basis there. And we're also very active in discussions with the African Union, WHO, AFRO, and other organizations. And we've had a very strong commitment to building regulatory strengthening and harmonization on the continent, which we believe is one of the key aspects for all pharmaceutical and life science operators on the continent, is to have this strong regulatory background. But let me focus now on the issue of COVID-19 and local production, because they are linked here, as been mentioned by the 2 previous speakers. And I don't want to actually repeat a lot of what has been said, because I can only say that a lot of the challenges that have been identified would be ones that are well known, and I would only repeat, and they're known. But I think COVID-19 has definitely increased the calls for local production. Definitely on the continent, there's no question about that, and we've seen this repeated many times. And I participated at an AMREF meeting recently on Africa Health, where of course there were substantial calls for the need for more local production to prevent or to be prepared for future pandemics. I think one of the speakers actually said that we didn't want to be caught with our pants down again. So it's important now to start taking local production seriously. I should say that local production has even been talked about in European and American circles, where the dependency on imports, particularly from Asia, either of raw materials for drug substance or for treatments themselves, and also for PPEs. It has certainly increased concerns about dependency, and there is even within the European Commission's pharmaceutical strategy, they're talking about the need for more local production and bringing certain aspects home to an extent. So everybody's talking about that. But I understand from the African angle, of course, how vitally important it is perceived because of the high dependency on imports. And I know the figures are around 80% of treatments which are imported into the continent. And of course, for vaccines, I think it's almost something like 99%. So there is a clear understanding of why this issue is becoming more and more important on the continent. And of course, as been mentioned by the previous speakers, the importance that local production can bring for knock-on effects, such as improving the economy, improving aspects around local innovation, and increasing health security overall. So taking those things all into account, I think what I would like to do is emphasize maybe where this industry perceives things from. Now, we've known about the move towards local production ever since the African Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Plan. It's been mentioned before. It is important to try to assess where we've had successes and where there have been challenges that haven't actually been overcome. And I think one of the success areas, I think, has been in the regulatory area, and we have seen substantial improvements in regional regulatory activity, which is very important. And I think that has helped both the local manufacturers as well as importers, whether those be generic or originator. So I think that's a very important development that we have seen. We have certainly seen over the last 10 years, there has been an increase in local production, and there's an increasing number of manufacturers, and a number of those are getting even to international standards, which is very welcome. From the standpoint of the innovative industry, innovative companies operate very differently themselves. They operate very differently within different regions, and they operate differently within countries. Obviously, the majority of products, of innovative products, will be imported, and they will be imported through established partners. Some companies do have some limited local production. Others have wanted to do so and have found significant challenges in doing that. Now, I think one of the key points that was raised before was the issue of tech transfer. And that relates to tech transfer, and I think to joint ventures as well. And I think it's important here to try and establish what sort of criteria, what sort of principles innovative companies would want, and even probably bigger generic companies that would want to operate in the African continent, partnering with local producers. I mean, one of the first key issues is to have a very trusted local partner that can be relied on, that has an experience in the continent, or at least regionally, I should say, has a good contact, an understanding of the business environment, respects business ethics, has a good standing within the country and the region. I think when we're looking at tech transfer, we've got to be assured that there is respect for IP, that there is an understanding in the companies that we're working with of how to deal with tech transfer, and there is capacity and skill capacity to be able to do that. I think the other things actually depend a lot more on, I think, how government operates. And I think it was mentioned before, and I mentioned it, this issue of government and being able to have a strong regulatory framework, a strong respect for business, proper governance, and respect for law. This is all fundamentally important when you have operators from outside the continent wishing to do joint ventures and tech transfers. And I think at the end of the day, it's to government that we really have to make the case, all as private sector, to build the framework, to build the ecosystem that the private sector can operate in. And without that government framework that needs to be established, it's going to be very difficult for us as private sector operators to be able to conduct tech transfer, joint ventures, registration of products. So it's so important, I think, for all of us to be able to make that case towards government that creating the proper infrastructure is what's going to attract the private sector and build up what is required. That leads me to a slightly different issue, which is, of course, and it has been mentioned before, is the need, obviously, to raise private investment and capital. And as we know, at the moment, that is expensive on the continent. And I think the more that can be done to help in providing capital and investment is going to be fundamentally important in the move forward. Now, most of what the continent's talked about for some time has been smaller molecules, what many would refer to as generics, and there has, as I said, been progress in that area, and I think there is a lot more progress that can and should be made. There is now, of course, talk of vaccine manufacturing, and a previous speaker mentioned that as well. And I think it just has to be emphasized that, of course, when we come to vaccine manufacturing, it's much more highly complex. We're going to need very specialized manufacturing sites, very specialized skilled workforce. We're going to have different types. There are different types of technology platforms which need to be addressed. There is some talk now that the new mRNA technology may be more suitable for the continent for the future. And I do emphasize the future, and that is all about leapfrogging. But that's going to take a whole concept of partnership and working very strongly together with originator companies that are developed or have developed these vaccines. And I think, again, there is such an important role, I think, for the African Union and for governments to work on this. It's not going to be possible for each and every country in Africa, as it is in many other countries in Europe. Not each and every country will be able to have a manufacturing site, will be able to have a company that's involved in vaccines, for example, or more complicated products. So there is a case for the African governments working together to try and establish sort of like single regional hubs, creating centers of excellence, and looking at how you can work capacity building around. And that's going to take significant leadership, again, both from the government and the private sector. I think that in the very short term, what we need to do is get the current vaccines to Africa through COVAX. But I think another point is there are abilities around fill and finish in vaccines, and we do have a joint venture between Johnson & Johnson, Janssen, who have just recently had their vaccine approved by the WHO for emergency use, and have agreed, was released several days ago, I think it was Monday actually, that will be supplying not only COVAX but the African Union. And they have a joint venture with Aspen in South Africa. So there are cases that can be built on. So I wanted to just conclude actually with an event that took place actually in 2014, which I was very happy to chair. And at the time, I was actually the CEO of the Medicines Patent Pool here in Geneva, where we were conducting licensing agreements between generic companies and originator companies for accelerating HIV products. And at that time, I was asked to chair a work stream as part of the EU Africa Business Summit. And I brought together innovative companies from Europe, generic companies from Europe, and local manufacturers, and some civil society groups. And at the time, we sort of identified what we thought were the key issues for all of us in the sector, from a business point of view. What were the real foundations? What's the real key points that needed to be done? The first was to create a strong regulatory environment. Second was to actually fight fakes, counterfeit medicines and substandard medicines, which, as you all know, is a plague on the continent. 3 was for governments to create a sustainable, and this is important, a sustainable pricing model, because then it's been mentioned by the previous speakers that there is the dependency on Asian manufacturing also results in a result of very low pricing requirements from governments. It's important, for example, even if we have procurement or poor procurement, that price isn't the only issue. It's got to be based on quality, and it's got to be based on security of supply, which of course local manufacturers on the one hand can do, as well as maybe on the innovative side, major manufacturers can do. So creating a sustainable pricing system is important for local manufacturers as well as others. The 4th was governance, the importance of having a well-governance structure for the business community. And the 5th was mentioned, licensing and tech transfer. So I wanted to conclude on those points, because that was something that was mentioned some time ago, but it also sort of reflects what a number of people are thinking from different parts of the private sector. So on that point, I'll stop, because I think people will want to ask me some specific questions. But again, very happy to have been asked to participate in this first of your events here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Greg. Whoever has a question, you can have a moment to ask your question. And as you get ready for that, Greg, I have one thing that I wanted to ask. We're looking at tech transfer and joint ventures and all the related components that can help us build capacity in the local pharmaceutical industry. We know from the IFPMA position, we have the big pharma, as we call them, which have the potential, have the capacity, and they're able to drive that agenda. What are the key things that you feel as African players within the African context we can do better? Let's say, for example, Cosmos Pharmaceuticals that's represented by Bina Mahida, what can they do to leverage on that kind of an engagement and drive that agenda? That would be one bit of it. And the same thing over COVID period, that is the second question and should be my last. In terms of COVID-19 vaccines and related, there has been push to have the IP rights being waived all over. And the main issue we're talking about is to improve access of these products based on the African context and the African capability in terms of pharmaceutical manufacturing and even development of vaccines. Even with the waivers, do we have the capacity? And what can we do to ensure that the IP rights are protected, because that is an intellectual property and there are regulations that are guiding that. But at the same time, we ensure the public health needs are being met.
Yeah, I'll take the second question first. Of course, this is a major issue at the moment, and I even think African Union countries are supporting the waiver. And of course, what's behind that is a wish, obviously, to get access to vaccines. Now, the thing is that the IP waiver won't, in fact, achieve anything. For a number of reasons. Firstly, the intellectual property issue isn't the issue, which is the main thing. So it's basically it's the wrong diagnosis of the problem. The problem that we have at the moment is based more not on having too many not enough manufacturing. We have significant challenges around scale up. So, and that relates to having access to the active ingredient. It has issues around syringes, issues around vials, issues around lipids, for example, for mRNA products. We've got completely new mRNA technology, so there is a question of scale up and time. So if you had a patent waiver, you wouldn't address any of the problems which are currently there, because those problems have nothing to do with intellectual property. What we need to do is to expand and increase the amount of the active ingredients, the vials, the syringes, etc., that are available. And we are working on that. And the industry has been active from day one, really, in the development. And what we are doing now is, and we established a manufacturers summit a couple of weeks back, which was also participated with CEPI and Gavi and WTO and WHO. So that's one of the things. So the waiver wouldn't actually achieve anything like that. Secondly, where we want to work on having, say, more partners around manufacturing or fill and finish or whatever aspect of it you want. What's key is, of course, a tech transfer. And even if you get rid of the IP doesn't relate to the tech transfer. And what the companies are doing is a lot of tech transfer. Just two examples of the companies which are based in our association, which is J&J. As I mentioned, they have a tech transfer and licensing agreement with Janssen. They also have a large number of manufacturing agreements with others. And they also have an agreement with an Indian company as well. AstraZeneca has, of course, a major licensing agreement with the Serum Institute, which has enabled the ability to expand substantially the amount of vaccines that are produced in developing countries for developed countries. The problem here, of course, now is that we know from India that there is a concern in India about the rapid increase of the COVID-19. And there is the issue around the export restriction that's been imposed, which of course is why there is a demand for more manufacturing on a more regional, local base, so you're not dependent on this. And this is why, for the future, there's definitely a case for looking at how we can create partnerships and licensing, etc. But this is a tall order in vaccines. And I say that not to discourage it, but to make sure that what is needed to be put in place, including what needs to be done by governments, it takes place. So, so the concluding thing, yes, the waiver, unfortunately, has become a bit of a distraction when we should be focusing on the other issues. In relation to what local companies can do, I think working together, establishing a platform, and getting the companies better known is not a bad idea at all. And I think that's a good idea. Locally, what is important, I think, is to be able to know that companies are they have good quality. It takes the manufacturing sites are GMP and etc. That you have a skilled task workforce. All of those things which are challenges have to be there in order for, I think, a joint venture or tech transfer. But I think one key area is really important, is to be seen as being highly respectful to business ethics, to innovation, and to the concept of IP, if that's part of the agreement. But there are an increasing number of companies in developing worlds that have licensing agreements or distribution agreements with innovative companies, and innovative companies are open to that. But again, as I said, there's a lot the companies can do. At the end of the day, there is so much around what the government's responsibilities are, including, as I said, having proper governance structure, having the respect for business ethics, having strong regulatory systems, cutting the red tape, and creating sustainable systems. It's all there. And this is why, basically, again, we all have to work together on this. This is said over and over again, partnerships, but it's so fundamentally important that we can do that. And at the end of the day, it's all about partnership, and in all the various levels that we can work on. I hope that answered your questions.
Yes, that answered it perfectly well. Thank you so much. I believe from the participants as well, we've taken it up, was from the pharmaceutical manufacturer, we need to engage And in our engagement, we need to engage from a point of looking at the quality, respect for business ethics, and then we look at other aspects in innovation. So business ethics, innovation, and respect for IP rights. Once we do that and then ensure the governments are enforcing proper frameworks for governance and ensuring there's access to these products, then we'll have a role in advancing the Africa Pharma agenda together. And I believe that is well taken from the participants. I don't see any questions on the chat box. You're free to share your questions. You're free to ask the questions. So from there, I'll move to the next presentation where we'll have Stella, Dr. Stella Kiptanui. She's the head of regulatory affairs and quality assurance from Maida Pharmaceuticals. So Stella.
Hi, David. Thank you so much. Kindly allow me to share my screen.
On it. Thank you.
I believe you can all see my screen. That's okay?
Yes, now we can see it.
All right. So thank you, David, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here to participate in the inaugural African Pharmaceutical Network and the topic on role of the African pharmaceutical sector in the pandemic response. I shall be sharing my perspective on the pharmaceutical supply chain and digital innovations. And this will be based on our company, Maida Pharmaceuticals. In the recent years, we have seen an increase in the use of internet as among our patients and medical practitioners. The vision of the WHO Global Strategy on Digital Health for 2020 to 2025 is to improve health for all by accelerating the development and adoption of appropriate and accessible, scalable, and sustainable patient-centric digital health solutions. Therefore, we see medical practitioners now offering medical services through digital health innovation tools, and therefore improving the access to patients to receive care digitally. The priority for any platform, of course, should be patient safety and best practice. Issues or challenges in the health service industry are basically what I've highlighted here. And issues of falsified substandard products found in the market are gaining access to our patients. This has been augmented by the high cost of medication to treat lifestyle diseases, the non-communicable diseases that have been prevalent in the recent years. From a public perspective, public facility perspective, we see challenges of access to essential medication, and we see shortages, stockouts, and substitution of medications. All this can be summarized by the fragmented supply chain systems in place, where we have medication passing through many hands, and the impact felt now on pricing of the medication, access to it, and the quality of this. Therefore, the biggest gap we see is this high cost of healthcare and lower quality care and medication to our patients. Maida then looks at to sort this gap by providing access to affordable medications at affordable quality medication at consumers' convenience. I will introduce who we are. We are an e-commerce solution focusing on health, wellness, and personal care products. We were awarded the first e-retail license as for an online pharmacy by the PPB in 2018. And our value proposition is to create value across the entire chain. That is by connecting our prescribers, insurance, and the patients to products when they need them. This is by merging technology and health to ensure efficiency and quality is enhanced. Our main aim at the end of the day is patient-centric. So when we look at the supply chain, we can see the different tiers which products would move from the manufacturer to the importer, distributor, wholesaler, retailer, and the consumer. Maida tries to come to bridge this gap. We aim to go as far up the supply chain as possible to connect the consumer to the products. Therefore, our channels to market are on a B2C level, which is the consumer online business we have. We also connect the insured members via insurance companies to access products, and we also ensure pharmacies and wholesalers at a B2B aspect. Our business is transparent in nature, and we offer patient confidence by ensuring each product that we source can be authenticated, and therefore ensuring the security of the product is enhanced right from the beginning to the consumer. A market research done in 2020 showed that out of the e-commerce brands in Nairobi, Maidawa ranked the second, showing that we have acceptance of this brand, not only as a business, but more so in the healthcare sector. Our 4 pillars are on quality, convenience, privacy, and affordability. So during this pandemic, what have we seen as a business? There's been a shift in behavior change among customers, moving from accessing medications from physical retail shops and moving to online to access their health and wellness products. We have seen an increase of those with underlying health conditions accessing medications from us. We've also seen a greater increase in the number of telehealth providers in the market, and even the use of this telehealth to access their prescriptions and any healthcare related information that they may need. We've also seen a growth in prescription sales, especially those with NCDs who would prefer to stay at home and practice social distancing. Patients have also stocked up on OTC products, supplements to boost their immune systems, and also PPEs such as masks, sanitizers, and hand wash to ensure that they are, as per the COVID, as they are covered against the COVID virus. There's also been an increase in essential items, in buying of essential items such as baby care, formula, and family planning products. In this, then we have ensured that we have contactless payments and contactless deliveries done at the doorstep for those who wish to practice social distancing and for those who have actually contracted the virus and they're able to access their medications easily. Also, the elimination of the payment and data costs by the government has ensured easier way of communicating with our platform and our communicating with us via our platform and for payment of online services. So quality in an online world. I'm sure many of us have managed to access products either on Uber Eats, Amazon, Jumia, and main issues that come up is poor online services getting wrong products delivered to them as compared as to how you would receive in a retail outlet. There are dispensing errors, and therefore Maida comes to bridge this quality issue and making it the core of our business from our products, which we source from manufacturers, local manufacturers or the sole authorized distributors. Therefore, we can guarantee quality of each product, our processes, and how we manage our own stock. We do not rely on any third-party stock. Therefore, we have control of what we actually have as our stock. The quality of delivery, where prescriptions are delivered by our pharmaceutical technologists and pharmacists who run the entire process, and also quality audits from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. So in a nutshell, the quality promise that we offer is on licensing, ensuring that we are governed under the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. We also have quality certification. Maida is the first e-pharmacy in Africa to receive the Legit Script certification, which verifies it as an internet operating pharmacy that is safe, credible, and trustworthy. We also ensure that our expertise on ground are qualified pharmaceutical staff, right from transcribing of prescriptions to packaging and delivery. And the whole operations is run by a superintendent pharmacy, ensuring receiving, storage, and distribution of medication is as per our processes. We also have product authentication, which allows the client to scan a QR code that is attached on every product to ensure that the product has been sourced from Maidawa and is meant for them. In the use of technology, we are an online system, meaning that we are transparent in our pricing, in our prescription dispensing, and therefore auditable right from the beginning of the process to the end. With the pandemic, we have seen an increase in use of e-prescription and claim forms. We have partnered with different insurances companies to ensure that these patients still receive their medication, especially COVID patients, to limit contact and ensure social distancing. So we have, they have allowed us to authenticate these claim forms as e-prescriptions and e-claim forms. We also have the ability to pay through various multiple methods such as mobile money, Visa, insurance, and this has enabled access by consumers to the products on our platform. We are also key on feedback. Therefore, we capture a lot of consumer and patient feedback so that we're able to improve our patient experience as we offer our service. We also adhere to the local and international data security to ensure whatever data we hold is also secure and private. So therefore, this is a solution to meet the health needs of Kenyans. We ensure that rational use of medication and patient safety is enhanced. Every patient can access information from our qualified personnel. We have a support desk or a support system available 7 days a week, and there's always a pharmacy team on duty. Every single person handling prescription medication and OTC are registered by Pharmacy and Poisons Board and registered pharmacists. And we also have a pharmacovigilance system in place on reporting poor quality in ADRs from our clients. We also offer convenience by ensuring medication delivery right from our warehouse to the patient's home or office. And we are also registered, so QA is enhanced by ensuring we're registered, we have certification, and our products can be authenticated. We have also partnered with various insurance companies, about 13 of them, to ensure that our clients also access their products through the insurance companies and through us, and our supplier partnerships to ensure that our margins are also within and the patients can be able to receive products at a good price. So our business model was not set up to meet the pandemic needs, but with the recent developments, it has shown suitable for this. We have not only met the stay-at-home needs and COVID protocols, but we've also provided service to those in need of health, wellness, especially those suffering from non-communicable diseases. I will just take you through quickly on how to order on Maida. You are able to log in, create an account, and you can submit a prescription. You can upload then a photo or a PDF copy of your prescription. And if you're using insurance, you can upload your claim form, select your provider and membership number, and order for yourself or your dependents. Once you've confirmed delivery and submitted the order, the prescription and the claim form are transcribed by a professional on the other side. And once they've gotten either verification and we've confirmed that the prescription is valid, we shall proceed to add your products into your cart and you're able to check out. At the point of delivery, we ensure that you have your original prescription and claim form, where we exchange that for the product as we give counseling. These are various ways you can get through to us, either phone, either email, and the various platforms. We operate from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Stella. It's been a good one, getting to know what you guys are doing with Maidawa and the key insight from the supply chain component of it, which is of essence and very important as well. So I'll just have a couple of questions, 2 or 3, in terms of what you guys are doing, because I know one of the critical challenges we have with supply and access to medicines in the African context generally is the affordability of it, the financing options. And that is one thing that I've seen you guys are looking at. How do we ensure that the financing aspect is met? And you've engaged with some of the insurance companies. How easy is it, or what are the other financial solutions? And even in that kind of an engagement with the insurance companies, how does it suit the needs of the clients? Because some are not able to afford. And how do you ensure that those who don't have the financing solution or insurance cover are still able to afford the products?
Okay, thank you so much, David, for that. We do have microfinancing capabilities where a patient is able to access medications on a finance-based platform, and they're able to pay back or at least access the medication and agree on a payment plan that works for them. So we do have that capability here. We've partnered with UMBA, who are able to offer us the microfinancing systems. And this has clearly enhanced patients who want to receive medication, especially our patients with hypertension and our other lifestyle diseases are able to do this and are able to create, and we're able to create access for them.
Okay, so that's kind of getting financing to procure the medicines when they need them, but they now create a solution, a plan on how they're going to pay that loan that they have taken for that medication.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. And then another thing that came out clearly was the aspect of the end-to-end integrated pharmaceutical supply chain model, where you're looking at it from the company all through. There's that traceability of the products, which is a key feature, because it's one of the things, even from the presentation we had from Greg, the critical challenge we're having in these fragmented markets. We have regulatory shortfalls. There's an influx of falsified, substandard, and counterfeit products. And these are affecting even the public health of the people who are taking up these products. So what are the best advantages that you see from that kind of an integrated? And what other options can be there to ensure that other players within the space can adopt such as well? Because it's our common interest to ensure that we safeguard the well-being of the people who take medications. And we need to ensure that if somebody invested in a product, they can see the value of it, other than having other people duplicate a product and compromise on the quality. Yeah.
So as a company, our main aspect is to connect our consumers to the manufacturer. Our aim is to go as far up the supply chain as possible, be able to source these products either from the local manufacturer, the sole distributor of this product, or even from the manufacturer who's maybe located outside the country, a foreign manufacturer. And we're able to now come down and ensure, first of all, the quality. Therefore, if it is purchased by us, we're able to say this is authenticated by us, and that's why we have the authentication sticker to ensure, first of all, the quality is maintained when we receive these products. And therefore, when we look at it, then the price and the fact that it's not going through many channels, the price then is maintained as low as possible to be able to be accessed by our patients. Perfect. So my advice would be try to reduce the number of people who need to go through to be able to access these products for our consumers.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. There's a question that has been sent by Hafiz Hamza. What are some of the challenges you faced with Maidawa, and how did you overcome them?
I think one of our biggest challenges at the beginning was, and something we are closely working with the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, is basically to the regulatory authority support from them. The challenge, it hasn't actually been a challenge, but in the sense of just setting up the certain guidelines on how to operate. What are some of the principles we need to put in place as an online pharmacy? What are some of the, because of the different types of online pharmacies in the country, in the continent, there's online, there's mail order, there's internet pharmacies, what type of guideline would come out from them? And we have basically set up, there's been no blueprint on how we should operate, but we really appreciate the guidance that we've gotten from them throughout the years that we've been operating from 2018 on how just to set up various aspects on how to ensure that our personnel are qualified, how to ensure that end-to-end quality is maintained. So those are some of the challenges at the beginning. Of course, as an online business, there was good pickup during the pandemic, and we're able to get better coverage in the country. So as a business, we have grown. And yeah, I think those are some of the challenges, just to name a few.
Thank you so much for that. The regulatory space is having challenges, and that's a fact that we have to acknowledge. So it means even from the aspect on regulation of accessing products, where we're talking about manufacturing, registration of products and all that, even in the model of practice. And we have to acknowledge that the regulatory frameworks are not as established in the e-pharmacy model. And that's why we already, even in the current context, when we find people are talking about falsified and counterfeit products, it's generally through the e-pharmacy, the digital platforms, and they're being misused for such. And that is where now we will call upon the regulatory authorities and players within the industry to play a role to ensure that we send away the people who are using, the unscrupulous players within the industry who are taking advantage of the individuals who might be innocent or might be just keen to get a service, but they're not sure that they're being hoodwinked or being they're being taken advantage of by the unscrupulous players in the market. So regulatory issues need to be addressed. And then the last question, as we move to the next person, is what is the response of the general public towards online pharmacy? What is the uptake like?
As I mentioned, our brand is growing. We were ranked the second Q4 of 2020. So I can say the brand awareness has been out there, and the response so far has been good. We did have our teething issues at the beginning, but with the feedback and the customer feedback aspect that we take very key in our company, we've managed to sort a lot of that. So I can say it's been good, and we hope to keep growing.
Thank you so much for that, Claire. So whoever has any other questions, you're free to share on the chat box. We'll move to the next person.
Thank you, David.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So as we continue, the next presentation is from Dr. Karim Mwanga, who is a regulatory pharmacy, the Pharmacy and Poisons Board at Kenya. So Dr. Karim, welcome.
Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As you've heard, my name's Karim Mwanga. I am a regulatory pharmacist working with the Pharmacy and Poisons Board now for about 10 years in different departments or different regulatory aspects. We can move on to the next slide. So as a way of outline, I'll look at some background, clinical trials oversight, registration and market authorization, licensing, inspection and compliance, quality testing and lot release, safety vigilance, and we'll have a conclusion. And maybe just as a reminder, I'm looking at regulations and the role of national medicine regulatory authorities. Next slide. So as previous speakers have already alluded to this, there have been major disruptions in the global supply chain in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, major reductions in manufacturing capacities for both foreign and local manufacturers. Temporary hold on exports, where countries have been ring-fencing their products for their countries or their peoples, and therefore limiting exports to other countries. Also increased demand for promising treatments of COVID-19, various treatments that have been put out there that are possible treatments. So people really having a higher demand for them. And then we are now aware about the COVID-19 vaccines, are the most current topic. And we also know that there was quite rapid development in the clinical trials for these products, and also now a large-scale production because of the very high demand on the global scale. Next slide. Now, as a regulator, it's very important that we are able to put in controls right from clinical trials to manufacturing of these products, and up to downstream to good distribution practices, storage, and even dispensing of these medicines at patient level. So I'll start with the clinical trials oversight. We all know that COVID-19 vaccines and even some of the COVID-19 treatments have been, low and middle income countries have been involved in clinical trials of these products. Of course, including Kenya, which has participated in clinical trials for AstraZeneca. And in the same breath, WHO established the AVAREF, which is the African Vaccine Regulatory Forum, which provides a platform where there is sharing of good practices, information, and basically regulatory oversight over clinical trials. So this is very important because it's a platform where African countries come together, to discuss issues of regulation of clinical trials. We also have countries have guidelines on clinical trials, which of course states on how clinical trials should be conducted in the different countries, including clinical trial inspections, handling of investigation products. And the whole aim is to protect study participants in terms of their safety and also in terms of their rights, and also to ensure that study designs are very sound with sound objectives to be able really to give good findings or results, at the same time protecting the safety of the study participants. Next. So quickly, I look at registration and market authorization. In the context of a pandemic, the role of the regulator will be really to cut down on the turnaround time in terms of approval of products which have been shown to confer benefit or be able to have intervention in terms of treatment or even prevention of these diseases in a pandemic. And also very important is to ensure that only authorized products enter the supply chain. So as much as you're putting in mechanisms to fast track authorization of products that have shown benefits for the diseases, you also want to ensure that your supply chain integrity is protected. And there are various levels of approvals. We have the stringent regulatory authority approvals listing. We have WHO listing. And now we have national level NMRA approvals that are done at country level. And in all these, there's an aspect of reliance mechanisms that are adopted by different countries. So the whole aspect of emergency use authorization is to reduce the turnaround time in terms of ensuring access of the population to these life-saving products. As a country, for example, Kenya, we have come up with the guidelines for emergency use authorization, and also compassionate use authorization that guides and lays out the framework in which all these authorizations will be granted for those who apply to be given the market authorizations. We also have joint reviews at regional level, East African region. We also have the IGAD and other regional level initiatives where there are joint reviews and experts come together to look at these dossiers and data that is submitted. At the same time, prioritization of value add activities. For example, if a product has already gotten a WHO emergency use listing and all the data has been looked in and it's been found to be sound and satisfactory, then you don't want to waste resources and go through the entire process. Of course, you have to evaluate and assess the data, but then prioritizing in terms of value add activities so that you are not doing it all over again, in terms, of course, also in the interest of the timelines. And then, as I've mentioned, reliance mechanisms, which are really critical at a time like this. The next slide. Licensing, inspection, and compliance, very critical to ensure quality, safety, efficacy, and effectiveness of these products. In this aspect, we have legal provisions in the law. For different countries, they have their own laws and regulations and guidelines that provide a framework which supports aspects of licensing, inspections, and compliance. And this is to ensure that products or activities actually comply with good practices throughout the life cycle of the product, all the way from clinical trials to manufacturing to imports to distribution in the supply chain, and also to dispensing or even storage of the product at healthcare facilities. And then it's very important that NMRAs or regulatory authorities are able to assess countries' demand, so that even as you license, you are able to, you have an idea of what a country's demand looks like. And then you're not over licensing, and also you're not under licensing people who supply the market. Evaluation of private and public sector supply chains, because these ones complement each other, and it's very important to evaluate and see what is the ratio of access in terms of public and private sectors. And then, of course, assessing the licensing needs of the country, maybe based on regions, or based on urban versus rural sectors, based on population demographics and all that, and then having a very clear and elaborate communication with the stakeholders. I just came from a meeting 1 hour, about 2 hours ago, where we are engaging stakeholders in terms of their role in deployment of COVID-19 vaccines in Kenya. And a very interesting meeting with a lot of feedback, with a lot of exchange of ideas on how to make it optimal and be able even to fill in the gap because of the demand that is actually rising for COVID-19 vaccines. Move on to the next slide. The issue of support of technology transfer and joint ventures, this one has been spoken to, I don't want to overemphasize. Capacity building for local manufacturers, very critical. And of course, collaboration with the public health programs, for example, national vaccine immunization programs, which are actually the core program that is running vaccination programs in countries. Next. Quality testing and lot release, another very important regulatory function. These enable us to monitor products for compliance against specification or registered specifications, or specifications against which emergency use authorizations have been granted. And of course, where there are gaps in the non-compliances, this should be able to be detected and regulatory actions implemented appropriately. Also important to provide guidance on standards and specifications, because sometimes manufacturers are able to manufacture and produce products, but sometimes they lack proper guidance in terms of the standards and specifications. And in Kenya, we've had a lot of support for local manufacturers who are producing alcohol-based hand sanitizers based on the findings we got after we had done a post-marketing quality survey of these products on the market. Similarly, for surgical masks, where we're using the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and of course, other PPE that are very critical in protection during this pandemic. And then most recently, we're talking about lot release for COVID-19 vaccines that are coming to the country. Next. Next slide. We all know that most African countries are very limited in terms of capacity. There are national quality control laboratories and other laboratories, even those that are WHO pre-qualified within the jurisdictions of countries, do not actually have capacity to carry out lot testing of these biological products, including COVID-19 vaccines. And therefore, very important to have contracts with external laboratories for quality assurance and testing of these lots of vaccines. And then reliance agreements and formal recognitions, very important, because sometimes we lack expertise to really be able to have those very, very advanced evaluations and reviews. And therefore, sometimes we rely on stringent regulatory authorities in WHO to be able to make our decisions. And review of batch processing records and summary protocols for each batch, of course, based on WHO guidelines, and also retention of batch records, especially for vaccines, a retention of these records at least a year beyond expiry or after expiry of the products. Next. Safety vigilance, very critical. We all know about the concerns that have been raised about COVID-19 treatments and products and their safety. It's a big issue, it's a big topic, all the way from Europe to America, to Canada, to Africa, to Kenya. We have a lot of concerns from the population about safety of these products. So adverse events, ADRs and AFIs, raise a lot of safety concerns among the population. And also the whole aspect that a lot of these COVID-19 treatments, some of them have been used off-label, having been given either emergency use authorization or the compassionate use authorization. And therefore that it really goes in to say that we need to be a little bit more vigilant in terms of these, the use of these products in the populations, because they're being used off-label. So some countries, and Kenya included, we have electronic reporting, pharmacovigilance electronic reporting systems, which collects spontaneous reports from healthcare professionals and also from the general public. We also have programs to train and sensitize of healthcare professionals, of course, together with the National Vaccine Immunization Program, just providing training on safety vigilance, on how to report, what to look for, how to detect adverse events following immunizations, how to manage these AFIs, and so on and so on. And also analysis using the expert committees. We have PV expert review and advisory committees. We also have vaccine safety advisory committees that comprises multidisciplinary experts who are able to review and analyze this data and be able to flag in case of any signal or correlation or associations, causality assessment, to check whether there's an association between the product, the vaccines, and the adverse events or events that clients are able to experience. And of course, very important is feedback to healthcare professionals, risk communications, and just being very transparent and sharing information with the general public. Next. In conclusion, a responsive regulatory oversight is very key, especially to be able to build confidence and trust by the population for products that are being provided, and especially so at a time like this on COVID-19 vaccines, because vaccine hesitancy is a really big problem. But we have seen that when information is very transparent, is very clear, there is very clear risk communication and managing of any crisis that might be arise, that actually builds confidence and trust in the healthcare delivery systems, and you're able to reduce dramatically the issue of hesitancy of uptake of vaccines. Also, application of science, very important, using science and evidence-based data to be able to inform policy and also advise government on what are the next steps and technology and innovation. Collaborative efforts among stakeholders, I think this has been emphasized. We all need to work together collaboratively, coming together, professional bodies, manufacturers, industry players, regulatory bodies, ministries of health, and other stakeholders to be able to put our heads together and work together in order to collaborate and be able to ensure that safety and efficacy of products. Transparency, risk and safety communication, information sharing, and just being alert on evolving issues around regulatory, both globally, locally, and even in the region. That's very key. Next slide. Yep, so those are some of the regulatory perspectives. There's something I haven't spoken to, the issue of advertisements and promotions of products. For now in Kenya, it's a very, very hot topic, if I can say, because we have seen some healthcare providers or healthcare facilities putting a lot of information on social media, basically promoting and advertising COVID-19 vaccines, and even sometimes putting price tags to those vaccines, others comparing and saying, this is better than the other and so on. And that is obviously very unethical. It is actually illegal because in Kenya we have a very clear law that stipulates what can be advertised or promoted and what cannot be advertised. And there are penalties in the law that can be applied for those who violate this. Just yesterday, I think, or a day before, we also saw one of the pharmacists in Nairobi who was trying to advertise a package of a combination of medicines. One of them, hydroxychloroquine, actually saying that you can have this package for COVID-19 and clearly advertising all this information on social media. And we were able to move in and take action against that individual. So we see all these unethical things coming up, and we are very alert. We are monitoring to ensure that those who plan to promote and advertise illegally, actually action is taken against them so that we protect the Kenyan public against information that may not be authenticated or that may be misleading or even that may not be appropriate for the general population. And so there are many aspects. From regulatory perspective, it's not always a straight jacket. There are many challenges. You always have to have a benefit risk balance at the back of your head all the time as you make decisions. But what I can say, it's never always a straight jacket, but whatever we do, always in the interest of the safety and the health of the public. Thank you, and back to you, David.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and oversight in terms of what the regulatory authority is doing in the Kenyan context, and also that is an insight for those who are in the regulatory spaces in different countries within the African context. Those are the approach. And as Dr. Karim has mentioned it from the bit of, you're looking at ensuring the products are available in the market for people who need them, the public health need, the healthcare needs of the populace. But other than just looking at the healthcare need, then we move to the bit where we now look at what's the quality, what is the safety measures? And that is a very critical bit that you've mentioned. I just have one question for you, Dr. Karim, in terms of as working with the regulatory authority, and one of the critical bits that you've talked about in terms of registration of products generally. We know we have shortfalls in the African context in terms of regulation, and we have fragmented regulatory systems. And that is where now we are looking at options and modalities of improving for the speeding up the registration of products, where we have reliance models and harmonization framework that are being adopted, even regional harmonization frameworks. I remember there was one for the EAC. There's the West African harmonization framework for regulatory programs. And then currently in the current context, there's a move towards the establishment of the African Medicines Agency, which is supposed to help in terms of harmonizing regulation and access of products within the entire African continent. What is the approach from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board as a regulator in adopting these, and what are the areas that could make it easier for the overall pharmaceutical system in Africa, comparing that in how we have the fragmented options working now?
Yeah, so I think regional harmonization and it's medicine regulation harmonization, it's very key. And as you have said, there are already initiatives in ESC, IGAD, and even in the South African region, I am aware there are some initiatives to bring countries together to have technical working groups and expert working groups, whether it's pharmacovigilance, whether it's post-market surveillance, GMP, product registration, all those aspects. Even clinical trials, I've mentioned AVAREF, which is African Forum. So all these people coming together to bring expertise together, sharing best practices and sharing of information in terms of even quality of products, and also jointly carrying out reviews and those evaluations for registration. It only expedites decisions. And also we know that a lot of these manufacturers supply products in more than one country in a region. And therefore, when reviews are done jointly, it makes it easier in terms of access and availability of the product to the markets, and also even for the manufacturer marketing authorization holders, they're able to, to only make one application and they're able to get authorization and supply the markets. So regional harmonizations and even reliance mechanisms are very key. You do not want to reinvent the wheel. You do not want to waste resources in duplication, but rather you want to do activities that add value, value add activities, so that you are optimally and doing the job of a regulator and also being as efficient as possible, and also relying on external expertise, because you cannot be able to have all the expertise within one house. So I totally support the idea of African Medicines Agency, AMA. Yes. Yeah, it's very opportune. It's coming at a very good time. We need a continental body that can be able to provide all these direction and guidance for other countries. We all know that there are countries that do not have any infrastructure in terms of regulation of medicines. And I know they'll benefit maximally from this platform, African Medicine Agency. And they can learn from other countries that have already advanced in terms of their regulatory landscape and frameworks, and be able to support each other. And peer mechanisms where you're able to learn from each other and benchmark and improve in terms of best practices.
Thank you for that. The aspect on one of the things that I've noticed, it's a good initiative. We're looking towards harmonization of regulations in the African continent, which is a good approach. And based on the current statistics and the current facts as it is, Kenya is among the top 5 in terms of regulation. and even the pharmaceutical industry development within the African continent. But unfortunately, as we're moving towards reliance, where we feel like the underdeveloped countries where there are no regulatory frameworks, I know of currently there are 10 countries which don't have established regulatory authorities. So it's a matter of most of the work are being coordinated from the ministries of health and related. So they would benefit from the strength and the capabilities of advanced regulatory authorities like Kenya. But unfortunately, even with AMA now being advocated for and being driven, Kenya is one of the countries that has the developed structure, but we've not ratified the treaty. So what would be the measure that we could take to ensure Kenya as a country, as an advanced country, regulation of medicines could ratify the treaty and move us towards where we aspire to be?
Yeah, good question. As I said, at an individual level, and not even speaking for the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, who is the regulator for the country, at an individual level, I think it's a good idea to be able to have a continental medicine regulatory agency. However, in terms of fast tracking Kenya to be able to ratify and join, support the idea of AMA, it is a policy issue. It's a policy decision. And therefore, from where I sit, I may not be able really to comment. All I can do is to be able to provide ideas to people who make policy and advise them that this direction is a good direction to go. And it's now up to them really to make that policy decision.
Okay, thank you so much. And I believe as all the participants in the room in our different countries, we also can have a role in driving this agenda through discussion, knowledge sharing, and seeing the benefit that it has for the African people and for our people in our different practices. It gives a room for us to advance the system, and we need to champion for it. And as we do that, we also need to look at the modalities of how it's going to be implemented. Because one of the critical challenges and shortfalls we have as a people is we might end up with having good treaties and good agreements that are there, but they're not operationalized. So they're not going to get us where we want to. And that is one of the things that we mentioned during the initial discussion on the pharmaceutical manufacturing plan for Africa. It's been in place for the last 5 years, but how far has it gone in terms of implementation? So as players in the industry, we have a role to play, and we need to move from there. So there's a question to you, Karen, before we move to the last presenter of the day. What measures has the Pharmacy and Poisons Board put in place to help and grow the evolving e-pharmacy field of practice?
Okay, good question. We all acknowledge that online pharmacy is a new concept for Africa. And I know it's not just Kenya, even East Africa. I talk to my colleagues from neighboring countries, and they tell me they're also grappling with challenges of really regulating e-pharmacy, online pharmacies, and even e-medicine, telemedicine, and so on. Yeah, however, we already internally are putting together mechanisms in terms of regulations and also guidelines, something that can really, a framework that can be able to guide the practice of online pharmacy. And it's very critical because, as you have said, there's a big opportunity in the negative way that people can easily introduce products which are not of good quality, substandard and falsified products into the supply chain, especially on online platforms. And therefore, we must be very alert and provide a framework that can be able to really be foolproof and ensure that the practice is streamlined. At the same time, there's a proper licensing and a proper regulation in terms of inspections and the whole regulatory framework, and to protect integrity of the products within the supply chain, and also even the professional input in terms of how patients are counseled when they receive their medicines. So we are putting together all that, and I think very soon we'll have something in terms of a regulation and as well as a guideline. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And one of the critical things that I just feel I need to mention at this point is that there are players who are already in the space, and this is where now the experience informs the regulation so that we have market-driven and responsive policies and frameworks. Because if we leave it to the regulator to put in place frameworks and guidelines, they would do that. But at the end of the day, are they meeting the market needs? What are the shortfalls you experience as a player in the market? So we need to be responsive as industry players and play a role in ensuring that at the end of the day, the policies and guidelines are meeting what the market needs and addressing the needs of that particular context. So thank you so much for that. We'll move to the last presentation. Professor David Cartere, I believe you're in the room so that we can start from there. And thank you for the wonderful presentation, Karim.
Could you allow me to share?
Yes, I can do that shortly.
It's still not allowing me to share.
Now you can.
Thank you. Yeah, good afternoon to colleagues here. Habari. I think that's what you say in East Africa. So it's yeah, the Kenyans are my in-laws. My sister is married there, so I'm very comfortable talking to people from East Africa. My name's Professor David Cartere. So I'm at Tshwane University of Technology in South Africa in Pretoria, and I am going to be talking about education and training and what needs to be done. So we put this together with my colleague, Dr. Amanda Lee Manicum, who now has to run. So I was not here earlier, but now she has to do the school run. So I am here now. This is the University of Tshwane University of Technology, TUT, one of the campuses. And this is the Innovation Hub, one of our other partners, and we'll talk about that just now. So what are the issues in the pharmaceutical industry? And these are really not just South African issues, these are continental issues actually. And in some cases, almost global issues. So there's a poor pipeline of workers for this industry. And I think this has been alluded to by previous speakers. University curriculum does not speak to industry. In South Africa, a study that I was involved in shows that it takes at least 18 months for a graduate out of university to become productive in the pharmaceutical industry. On the other side, there's also higher unemployment among science graduates. I know that because we've done a lot of studies around science graduates. So the pharmacy graduates in South Africa and in the region usually get absorbed into the retail sector. But not so much again into industry. And then, of course, as a result of COVID-19, we now have a high demand for health products, as you know. Africa being having a high burden of disease, this has just been accentuated by COVID-19. And just earlier on, I think our regulator friend was talking about potential for counterfeit and substandard products. We have done studies in the region where we find that people are pushed into the counterfeit market because there is a shortage or cost implication which is associated with sort of conventional or products moving through conventional chains and the quality thereof. And then, of course, whether you're sitting in Nigeria or in South Africa or in Kenya, we know that Africa is endowed with resources and has its own indigenous knowledge system, which needs to be developed and moved into industry. And then there's a whole issue of biologics, which has come to the fore as a result, number one, of vaccines, but also even COVID. A lot of the treatments that are being used for COVID are biologics, which biologics we are unlikely to be able to get in Africa, or if we get them, they are at extortionate prices. And then, so overall, there's also the need to increase capacity of regulators. We do some work with regulators here, and what we find is being able to assess biologics, being able to assess herbal products, being able to assess vaccines, for instance, is a big problem. So therefore, these are the issues across the continent. And how can we address those issues? So the university has set up recently a chair, of which I am the incumbent. So this is a chair of pharmaceutical and biotech advancement in Africa. because the whole idea is really that we need to have these chairs and centers across the continent. So part of the solution, wherever you're sitting, is to have a collaborative vehicle which allows all stakeholders to be involved. This is industry, academia, and citizens. One of the studies that we are embarking on is vaccine hesitancy, which again was mentioned by the previous speaker. And not just in South Africa, but in the region. So again, we are always happy to collaborate with people in East Africa, in West Africa, so that we have a global, if you like, continental picture. And then in that solution is also training and capacity building. So this is of students who become regulators, and also of regulators, but of students who become entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs who become students. Because we are saying that, again, when you go back to the conversation around the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa, PMPA, we are talking about a homegrown industry. And that homegrown industry is not going to happen unless we support entrepreneurship, unless we support students to become entrepreneurs, unless we support students to become good regulators. And then, part of it is we are building this into a regional and international collaborating center. So for instance, we are having conversations with guys in the WHO. In East Africa, you have the EAC region, which is, I don't know now if you have a regulator called EAC regulator, but I've interacted with some of the colleagues there. In Southern Africa, we have the SADC regulator, which is called Zazibona. So we work with WHO closely on that. And then whatever solution it is, it should also provide relevant research to industry and for policy making, because sometimes we tend to just cut and paste policies. And a good example is with the lockdown issues happening. Just because France is locked down doesn't mean that we should be locking down, Nairobi or South Africa at worst, because our circumstances are totally different. So policy should be informed by research. And then we are also very interested in product development, and we actually have some products that we have developed. So we work across the whole pharmaceutical value chain, right? So pharma, biopharma, complementary clinical research, pharmacovigilance. If I have time, I might show you some of our work. And then we have 4 thematic areas. So across all of these, we are working with regulatory strengthening. So at the moment, there's training going on, coming to an end now, which includes regulators. And when we train, we want to have regulators, industry, students, so that everybody is learning from each other. So at the moment, we have training coming to an end on cannabis and herbal manufacturing. I'll show you a little thing later on. And then, of course, tech transfer. So we work with partners where we can access dossiers, but not just dossiers, but also the technology around, the know-how around those dossiers, right? So, you feel free to contact us if we can be of help. And then research and development, how can we actually solve problems, be they formulation problems, be they, market related problems, but also then innovation around products, and then business and management support. So we actually are partly located in the innovation hub, and the reason why is because we can then work with SMEs and SMME, small and medium enterprises. So this is phase 1, which we are setting up at the moment, at least in terms of infrastructure now. We are setting up a technology station which is aimed at capacitating the industry of cannabis and herbal processing. So that will also then be involved with essences, herbals, and cannabis, which is a new frontier. and we will assist entrepreneurs with new product development and then also commercialization. This particular hub or project is actually has different partners. So you see here the innovation hub space, that the picture that I showed you earlier. We have a partner who provides with equipment. So they are providing us with equipment at discounted price, but then they will also be doing training on that piece of equipment. So this is an SFC supercritical, yes, SCF supercritical fluid extracting machine. So really a cutting edge type of thing. And then as TUT, we are then involved in project management and in the R&D because we have students. And then we will bring in different tech partners depending on what it is people are bringing in or interested in. That's where the commercialization comes in. Another initiative which is taking off very soon in June, actually, so you're free to also have this conversation with me, is around biosimilar and vaccine development. The funny thing is that we had already started planning this well before COVID hit our continent. January last year, we had already started, and we had a grant from ICGEB, which, as you know, is a UN agency based in Italy. I don't know if Kenya is or Nigeria or some are members, but so we have a partnership with them, and we'll be conducting a training. So in June, we are going to do 5 weeks of training. So this will be 2 hours a day. We will advertise, we'll send out these things to you if you're interested. And then unfortunately, we actually wanted to have this in our labs, but obviously as a result of COVID. But actually, it gives us an opportunity to now broaden this because we're going to have it online, but we're also going to be having simulated learning. And because it's 2 hours a week, we will then send people back to whatever labs for them to learn, let's say cell culture. How do you do cell culture? You know, go back and do it. And then the next time we meet, you can report about what problems you had. Transfection. This is how you transfect. Go back and learn. You know, so we are hoping that it's really going to be a hands-on but virtual type of training. We also want regulators to come. So regulators will come through for a discounted price, or we can negotiate even, because at the moment we work with SAPRA because the regulators need to know biosimilars and they need to know how to regulate biosimilars, right? And then the physical space, again, at the Innovation Hub will actually have pilot manufacturing. So an entrepreneur can come in and say, you know, I would like to make a monoclonal antibody, for instance. How do I do it? And they can come in and learn. Okay, so these are the different partners. Innovation Hub. Okay, ICGB is not there, right? And so yeah, I would like to thank you. And just in conclusion, to say that you know, Africa has some way to go in to capacitate itself, but we are the ones we have been waiting for. Nobody is going to give a hoot about capacitating us. So we need to do it, but we also need to invest in capacitating ourselves. So, you know, whatever opportunities arise, let us invest in that. One of the things that when I work with companies is that companies hardly ever invest in developing their own people, which is a crying shame. We have what's called Southern African Generic Manufacturers Association. In East Africa, you have the IAPMA, and you know, people hardly ever send their stuff for upskilling, for instance. And until we get to a point where we realize that human capital is really the most important capital in our businesses, then we are doomed to fail. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation, Prof. It's interesting the fact that you're looking at how you build capacity, research bit, and looking at the different components of it. And so there's just a question that has been shared as well by one of our speakers and the guests as well. So how do you navigate the challenges of regulation of cannabis products? Because I know this is one of the issues that we have in the different countries as well, and it's an emerging area. So could you just respond to that?
Yeah, and it's a shame because the people who banned cannabis are the ones who have now legalized it, and here we are as Africans still saying cannabis should be legal. You know, we need to legalize cannabis and get the taxes out of there, because we have the best soils in the world. Yeah, so let's let our farmers grow it. And remember, there's also a difference between hemp and cannabis. In Southern Africa, there was a big cotton farming, which is now kind of dying. Cotton is actually very bad for the environment, whereas hemp is not, right? So most of Southern Africa now has regulations for cannabis. You know, so from Malawi, Zimbabwe is doing very well. South Africa is a bit iffy. Again, these issues of, Lesotho is the leader right now, and they are really getting a lot of benefits from taxation. You know, all the big Canadian companies which can't grow cannabis in cold climates are all down here in Lesotho. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I would really like my in-laws in Kenya to take this seriously.
Well, but how do you go about the regulatory components and the different challenges? Because everybody is talking about so far we have the negative consequences and the negative impact that people have been used to, the addictiveness, being a drug, substance of abuse, and related. So how do you go about that? How do you build a case to ensure that the regulation of these products are opening it up for investment and people to venture into?
Okay, so the first thing is to separate out, hemp from medical cannabis, right?
Okay.
So this is really for medical use, and I would be happy to give a workshop or presentation one of these days on that difference. And then there's recreational cannabis. So there are actually 3 different parts of cannabis. But we find that, for instance, in intractable epilepsy, there are a lot of cannabis products. In fact, the only product that works is based on cannabis. And so cannabis does work. And then we have CBD versus THC. THC is so-called the bad guy, you know, the one that gives a high. So in South Africa, for instance, if your product is a CBD product, you can sell it over the counter, right? But there's a huge industry around that. You can imagine that now you have testing labs that have to come up to be able to test for THC versus CBD. You have the farmers who have a whole network. You know, you can organize them into a whole network of people who are producing fiber, producing cannabis, hemp, but also medical cannabis. So it's really amazing. But like I say, maybe a talk for another day.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And it's very critical that some of the things that you've mentioned in terms of companies investing in their people, capacity building is as important as any other thing, because for us to drive a common agenda for advancement of the pharma industry, we need competent and skilled people, and that is where we need to invest. And beyond that, there's something that I've noticed in terms of the presentation and the work that you're doing in the phase 1 for the cannabis and these are the one for biosimilars. There's an integration of the training institutions to the industry and the market. And that is something that we need to foster to ensure that the people who are trained, they are already getting market aligned skills that are going to enable them transition into practice. And when that happens, then it means the transition is easier, the impact in terms of training and impact and delivery of services is better advanced. So that is something that I feel we need to take up as well from here. So we've taken so much of our time as well for the session. We were to end at 5 and we've gone past that. So I'll just give each of the speakers of the session a minute to just say their final remarks. And I'll start with Bina Maida, if you're still in the room. Yeah, Bina Maida.
Oh, thank you, David. Okay, for me, what I would like to say is that I was happy to be part of this platform. I have seen insightful presentations. I have seen that there is hope for local manufacturers in Africa. And it's good to see that we're not the only ones trying to advocate for local manufacturing, but we have support from the regulatory authorities and all other associations as well. So it's encouraging to have this platform, and I hope we will have much more sessions like this, where we are able to put our points across and hopefully do something good for the local manufacturing as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for your contribution as well. We look forward to engaging and working together with you moving forward. Asante sana. Dr. Karim?
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm also excited to be part of this. I just want to say that I've been part of a project where we were doing a landscape analysis of the local pharma sector, and we just launched a report together with the IFC World Bank, the Kenya Pharma Diagnostic Report. It's now out there. So I'm really looking forward, because one of the things we want to do is actually implement on the recommendations. And I've seen opportunities in this forum where we can tap in all the way from professor in South Africa, all the way from our friend, is it Greg?
Greg,
all
yes.
those, I'm looking at that as resources that we can tap in terms of implementing a recommendations that are going actually to take our local industry to the next level. And of course, all these feeding into creating structures at continental level and even at regional level. Thank you so much. And we continue to, we hope to continue to engage as a continent and as a region.
Thank you so much for that. It's been a pleasure hosting you as well. And the insight that you've shared are very invaluable in terms of how we can collaborate with regulatory authorities and drive a common agenda for the pharma industry in Africa. So thank you for that. Stella? Stella, keep turning here.
So thank you so much for the invitation to speak. Technology and the integration with technology and integration with health is something that can work to meet any model, and especially during these pandemic times. We can have various capabilities to scale up the supply chain systems to ensure that the patients will still be able to receive safe and efficacious medications. So I look forward to more discussions on how we can embrace digital innovations. And it was a pleasure being here and meeting all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stella. And that is a very critical bit as well for those of us who have an interest in technology, those of us who are all of us are within the healthcare space. We're looking at the intersection between digital solutions and the healthcare access and ensuring that we blend the two to give value in terms of the intended ultimate outcome. And thank you for taking the lead, Stella, with Maidawa, where you guys are working. It's a novel approach, and we hope it takes root and gets us where we need to be. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And finally, Professor Jimezi. Professor Cartere, David, you can give your final remark. I think Jimezi has left.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure to be with you. And David, you know how I was juggling all these things. We had interviews in the department. I had another webinar, but I'm just so glad that I managed to catch quite a bit of this, and hopefully you'll share the recording as well. And yeah, I mean, it's great to see Africans doing things, right? Yeah, because that's what we should be doing. So if nothing else materializes, the fact that you've managed to convene us here and get us, you know, excited about this industry that we belong, then that's good enough. But if we can go beyond this, start building the networks, start working together, there's enough for all of us. Right. So yeah. So thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to future interactions. Sante sana.
Thank you so much, Professor. It's a pleasure to host you as well. And before we close, we have a guest who is one of our colleagues and one of our stakeholders within the industry. So I'll give a chance to the Secretary General, Africa Pharmaceutical Forum, and a branch and arm of the FIP, International Pharmaceutical Federation, Dr. Didier Molim. Please
Yes.
say a word,
Okay.
yes.
No, it was a great pleasure and honor for me to be invited to this important meeting. And then we are happy when any initiative is taken to make grow our own industry. Nobody cannot build our continent for ourselves. What is important is to know that now the world is equal. We have the same knowledge. It's just to us to take a decision and opportunity to make a product available for our population. We are industrial pharmacists. We can do it. We can research investor in Africa. Also outside, but in Africa, there are many investors who can invest if we make them trust our knowledge. And this kind of meeting is an opportunity to share knowledge, and we hope it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Didier. It's a pleasure to have you as well. And I've seen the president of the Africa Pharmaceutical Forum is also here. I don't know if you could just say a word, Prosper. Dr. Prosper.
Yeah.
I believe is yes, thank you. You could just say a word.
Yes, it's my pleasure to be with you. I received the invitation yesterday, but it was enough to be with you. I'm really happy. I'm glad to be here today to speak on behalf of the African Pharmaceutical Forum, but also to encourage initiatives in our continent. You see, I have a mask. I have a mask because 5 of my colleagues are COVID plus, which is very bad. We have to do something for that. I think what we have to do is to accelerate vaccination everywhere in our continent. It's the only solution that we have now to push, to advocate for access to vaccination. I think all the organizations talking about health in our countries should focus on vaccinations. Vaccination by health workers, but while health workers means also pharmacists. Pharmacists should vaccinate in our continent. This is the message that I wanted to give here at the beginning of this meeting, important meeting. But I want to know more about you, and maybe all along the meeting, I will be more edified about what we are doing. I know we can read on the website many things, but it's better to learn by our own experience. That was finally, thank you. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for what you are doing, what you do. And I think we can together look to our future very positively.
Thank you so much for that. We'll have a chat more. As I've had a chat with Rostand as well. We'll need to get to engage and see areas of collaboration because we're working within the same space and we can find values of driving a common agenda forward together. So thank you for taking your time to be part of the discussion. Thank you for your insights, and most critical, the contribution that you gave at the last minute. Vaccines is our way out. We need to get vaccinated and champion for vaccination through our healthcare workers and for the frontline people who are delivering care. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Ray. So the final remarks, I'll give you the chance to give us your closing remarks, Jimezi, before we call this to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I can't thank you enough for convening this platform. I think this has the potential to really move Africa forward. I mean, as I listen to everybody, I mean, I've been here listening to everybody, I mean, just feeling so excited. I mean, when I set up Bloom with my colleagues, this is what we are trying to push. How do we make Africa stand? Instead of relying so much on aids and help without thinking outside the box. So I have so much hope that APN will change the things, will move things forward, really. Of course, from my own end, any support that will come from me, I fully make it available. And I'm urging all the colleagues, both speakers and those who have participated in this, to see this as a kind of a renaissance of a pharma sector in Africa. How do we come together? We cannot continue to work in our silos, no? We cannot do so much. Coming together, we can have a stronger voice and advance this discussion beyond what we and each of us do, no? Can do beyond what we can do individually. Coming from Cartere in South Africa, doing very well, from academia and advancing it, regulators, Kenya, practitioners too. I think really this is a platform that we should all encourage and promote. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to working together with this team and pushing the pharma sector forward in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that contribution, and thank you everyone for making it to be part of the Africa Pharmaceutical Network. We look forward to having quarterly discussion as promised. The recording will be shared for those who didn't get to be part of the discussion. And for ongoing engagements, there's a link that has been shared to our LinkedIn group. There's the African Pharma Network group. It's a closed group, so that we bring ideas and share ideas on how we can advance the agenda moving forward. But for the open discussion as the one we've had today, this will be on a quarterly basis as we see how we can bring value and support one another. Thank you for taking time to be part of the meeting, and thank you for committing to drive the African Pharma agenda forward together. Thank you and have a great evening and a great day ahead for those who are starting their days. Asanteni.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David.
Thank you and bye.